I'll never forget my mother's 75th birthday. All the family had gathered, and my three daughters were there physically, but I noticed they were emotionally not there. They kept tugging at my sleeve, asking when we were leaving, even though they adored their grandmother. They were stressed about assignments they had to finish and tests they had to study for. I was so frustrated that the tentacles of school could actually creep into our home like this and demand their free time? That somehow worksheets and memorizing formulas was more valuable than spending time with aging grandparents? This was so different from my own experience growing up. School was not the center of my world. So I was really struggling with this institutional system that was trying to mold and shape my daughters into some cultural version of success. Not able to see them as unique individuals with talents, hopes, and dreams that could not be quantified on a test. I felt like a salmon swimming upstream against this system. So I, in my home, prioritized experiences and relationships. But it was hard to move against the cultural tide. Then I found Sir Ken Robinson. His videos and books really gave me an understanding of what I was feeling and helped me gain perspective. I kept on swimming upstream. He also set me on my path of advocacy with his call for a grassroots revolution in education. This led me to executive produce the Meaning in Madness film series. It was an amazing moment in my life when Sir Ken and his daughter Kate signed on as co-executive producers of our first film. I am so sad he's not here to be the spokesperson with his trademark wit and humor. Instead, I'm here paying tribute to him with our joint film project and the movement inspired by both his ideas and the meaning-centered philosophy of renowned psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. The Meaning in Madness name reflects the critical role meaning plays in our lives and our cultural madness in ignoring it. The series emerged from a question and a quote. The question, why are so many youth plagued by anxiety, depression, addiction, and worst of all, suicide? And the quote by Frankl, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. We wanted to look at the situations contributing to the disturbing reactions in so many youth. We chose to highlight the education system in our first film. Both Sir Ken and Viktor Frankl challenged the practice of treating human beings as products to be manufactured along an assembly line and the distress that it causes. We wanted to give voice to students. We searched for a teenager who had a story they wanted to tell on camera and whose parents would be courageous enough to let them do it. So many students have experiences with anxiety and depression, but the shame and stigma surrounding mental health issues makes it hard to talk about. We heard about Mackenzie and were so impressed when we met her. She bravely shares her personal story in the short documentary, but her experiences are relatable to many. We are proud to be on her team. 3 themes relate to our first film. 1, humanness, 2, standardization, and 3, hope. Humanness, what does that mean? Sir Ken described 2 worlds that relate to our lives. The first world is the outer world surrounding us. It is the world that existed before we were born and will exist after we are gone. It is the world of other people, plants, animals, events, and so on. The second world is the world of our unique being, the world that is born when we are and only we can know. No one else lives our experience. We see the outer world through our inner world, which is why we all see the world and even the same event in different ways. It is through the interaction of these 2 worlds that we create our life. We have the ability to recreate it as well, based on what we are learning and the choices we make in responding to our circumstances. Learning is a human process involving curiosity, and not all of us are curious about the same things. What we are drawn towards relates to meaning, which is specific to each one of us. Viktor Frankl's theory, called logotherapy, tells us that meaning cannot be given or created. It is a deeply personal discovery process that requires us to move beyond our unique self to the world around us. Sir Ken's own story describes this. He was born into a working-class family and was struck with polio at the age of 4. He was placed in a special school for kids with disabilities, just as he would be now in our current system. But an educator saw his potential and broadened his exposure to new environments, thereby expanding his possibilities. Sir Ken's disability did not stop him from having a profoundly positive effect on the lives of so many, including my own. Each and every one of us is unique and irreplaceable, with a mind, body, and spirit. Our human spirit, or soul as some call it, is what distinguishes us from everyone else. It is the source of our imagination, creativity, goals, humor, etc. Which brings me to our second theme. Unique human beings do not fit into standardized molds. We cannot be manufactured like widgets or programmed like robots. It is soul-crushing to us because it ignores that who we are, just as we are, matters to the world. When we are disconnected from ourselves and the world around us, like when we are put in closed-off education systems, we experience feelings of meaninglessness, a void in us. Viktor Frankl determined that this void gets filled with aggression to ourselves and others, addiction, the numbing of ourselves, or depression, ranging from anxiety to suicide. A few years ago, my area in Southern California was rocked with 4 teen suicides in a span of 3 weeks. The youngest was 13. One death in particular had lasting impact because 16-year-old Patrick Turner left behind 3 suicide notes detailing the reasons for his suicide. He addressed one to his school, one to his family, and one to his community. Patrick described the unrelenting expectations he felt to fit into our cultural mold. Here's a quote. "So much pressure is put on kids to do good, and a lot of kids make mistakes. One slip-up makes a kid feel like the smallest person in the world. You're looked at as a loser if you don't go to college or if you get a certain GPA or test score. There is never a moment to break." Although he was a star athlete and a good student who showed no sign of anxiety or depression, his despair was evident in his notes. Despair is suffering without meaning. Our education system is inequitable, marginalizing millions. But even those who have the resources and support to produce the desired numerical results are suffering. Research by Authentic Connections shows that students attending high-achieving schools have elevated levels of serious mental health issues and are now considered among the top 4 at-risk groups, along with those exposed to poverty, trauma, and discrimination. We keep our attention on system inequalities as if the system works for the vast majority of students, which it doesn't. They are not being well prepared for life or work. By its very nature, an institution focuses on measurable outputs, not nurturing human beings. That is what communities do. But we have disconnected our children from their communities with the overwhelming number of tasks they're required to perform. These tasks limit time for relationships and exploration, the very things that make life meaningful. The so-called earnings premium of a degree is often the reason cited for kids to follow the system. But the substantial costs in time, debt, and most importantly, mental health have to be considered. Adding to the expense side is the loss of their childhoods and the essential role that unstructured play has in their human development. Calculating earnings without accounting for expenses is irresponsible math. A 2017 IBM report pointed out that 90% of the world's data had come into being in the previous 2 years. 90%. Can you imagine where it is now? There is no way teachers, administrators, testing companies, or even policymakers can stay abreast of the content needed. From the time students enter school to the time they get out, much of what they've learned is outdated. The world is transforming too quickly. Few students work or do college internships. We need to question whether keeping them removed from such a rapidly evolving workplace really prepares them to enter it. The number of students who make it through to the goal of a bachelor's degree and get a job that requires a degree is embarrassingly small. Not to mention that 7 out of 10 jobs don't require one, and we missed adapting to a well-paying tech industry because of the system's rigid structure. As Sir Ken noted, if the education system was a business accountable to its customers, it would be out of business. We have told our children that all of their sacrifices are for their own good, and they listen to us. But we aren't listening to them, and they are screaming at us with their headaches, stomach aches, eating disorders, anxiety, depression, suicides, drug use, and all the other reactions we're seeing in youth today. Research now shows that depression is actually a signal. It is how we react to protect ourselves when we feel threatened, judged, or isolated. As Johann Hari points out in his insightful book, Lost Connections, 7 of the 9 known causes of depression relate to the way we live, our disconnection. We are so busy with our productivity and individual achievement models that we are losing our humanity, and it is causing distress and even harm. Is this really how it has to be? There has to be a better way. So let's talk about hope. Educational liberty is the freedom to be self-determined and the responsibility involved with that, to pursue meaningful interests and relationships, and to learn from trial and error as humans do. We don't have to imagine if this is possible because there are educators, parents, and businesses creating these types of learning environments. Over 25 years ago, Big Picture Learning pioneered student-directed, real-world learning in underprivileged communities with astounding success. They have now expanded internationally. The models are out there and the quiet revolution has been building. We find ourselves at an opportune time in human history, a time when we have the ability to inexpensively learn just about anything at any stage of our lives and often in locations of our choosing. New learning and training platforms are exploding. The world is literally at our fingertips. Alexander Den Heiser says, "When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower." Imagine if we broke down the walls of the silos we've constructed around our homes, workplaces, and schools and created a human-centered ecosystem of learning in our communities. Schools would no longer need to carry the sole burden of handling everything from childcare to meal delivery to education. Imagine if we freed teachers to focus on their relationships with students as co-learners and mentors, rather than conduits of information delivery and test taking. If we elevated their professional status and paid them to reflect the valuable role they play in the lives of our children. And most importantly, if we shared the responsibility for inspiring learning. Imagine if we honored individuality and encourage students to embark on a quest to find their element, to search for meaning, with the support of their communities. Imagine if we believed that we are part of one humankind and that each and every one of us is meant to be here, that in focusing on discovering our own meanings, we create more diverse and vibrant communities. I'll leave you with this. We are each born into this world for a finite time with a finite amount of energy and the responsibility to use it well. The contribution of each and every one of us is essential, and together we have a big task to perform. Our education system is like a machine that we collectively built and we collectively feed. Imagine if we decided to stop feeding the machine, or more accurately, stop feeding our children to the machine. Sir Ken advocated for the collaborative power of communities and the shift from school-centered outcomes to learner-centered discoveries. We have the ability to honor his legacy by bringing this vision to life.